Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Dr. Alok Bajpai, Mr. B. Sanjay, Mr. Sham Kishore Sahai, Professor Mark Jorgensmeer, Cheryl Banwarilal, Mr. Piyush Khandelwal, distinguished guests, and online members. Welcome to today's very interesting program, the celebrations of Gandhi Jayanti. The 2nd of October celebrates Gandhi Jayanti, and SVCC Durban is currently celebrating the Gandhian perspectives and the 5 facets of Indian culture. And the facets of Indian culture will be showcased throughout the month of October. And they are on the topics of truth, compassion, creativity, dialogue, and service. With today's topic being truth. Without further ado, we would like to welcome our first guest speaker joining us from India, Dr. Alok Bajpai. Dr. Alok Bajpai is a psychiatrist and presently working at the Kanpur in after a few stints abroad. Apart from practicing psychiatry, a consistent focus in his work is with children, adolescents, and youth, being associated with various schools and institutes. His work extends beyond the confines of clinic to freelance teaching of mental health issues and life skills. Psychiatry, physics, film, music, literature, and teaching are some of the things that occupy Dr. Alok Bajpai's wide world. He has been an instrument in putting together many awareness campaigns and workshops, especially with schools, and he's trained with teachers aiming at increasing sensitivity towards childhood problems in many Indian cities. We welcome Dr. Alok Bajpai for his remarks.
Hi, thank you, Srishti. Thank you, Yogi. Uh, See, when we talk of a person like Mahatma Gandhi, obviously it cannot be a linear talk, and none of his ideas are ever exposed in a linear fashion. When we talk about Gandhi now, after 72 years of his death, people look at him from different angles. The problem which arises when people talk about Mahatma Gandhi is that most people get engrossed in his politics. Now, that was the paradox which he faced in his own life. And the paradox was that all the experiments for which South Africa was the laboratory, all the experiments were done in the din of politics. And there is the same politics which is used against him and for him. So, but the the theme which you want to explore in today's discussion is something for which we have to look deeper into Mahatma Gandhi. Because people can talk about ahimsa, people can talk about his disposition, they can talk about his satyagraha, they can talk about his love, sacrifice, so on and so forth. But trust me, you cannot talk about Gandhi unless you unite all this in one thread. Because for him, life was not a discrete, categorized experiment. Life for him was one big experiment which actually arose from his own belief of unity. One, that all are one, every human being needs a validation, and the deep cause of it was the empathy which he had developed. So, if you keep this in mind, that Mahatma Gandhi ji, whenever he was right from the day of when he was thrown out of the train in South Africa, even before that, even before when he was in England, he was very early had realized that the gaps between human beings are false, illusory. And then he went on to develop empathy, a part of which was the extension was non-violence and disposition and leaving everything which can create gaps. So the bottom line of all this, which stands highlighted and marked, is truth. And obviously, we know Satyagraha was devised in South Africa, which was very successfully used in India in the freedom struggle, which of course is the science of there is a science of Satyagraha. And we all know that it was Sadgraha and then Gandhiji changed it to Satyagraha. So in this brief time, let me tell you very, very intensely what I think as a neuroscientist, because these days I'm trying to map Gandhi's process to how and what we understand of the brain. And trust me, he was one of the greatest experiment of human mind which we have seen. We may not realize it now, but few years later we will know. Obviously, some of us call the mirror neurons in the brain, which give us a capacity of empathy, as Gandhi neurons. So, what did Gandhi mean by truth? This person who was traveling with Gandhiji when he was on board to England to do his law, this person, I'm forgetting his name, but much later he wrote, when he was asked about his experience as his impression of Gandhi, he said there was this socially awkward looking man, was slightly isolated. Gandhi was socially anxious to a certain age in life. And Gandhi was also, in a sense, that he was not so conscious of himself. He became conscious of all this in South Africa only. So, but this person said, one remarkable thing about Gandhi was that he thought that he is speaking the truth. And he also thought that my truth is the truth. This was a young Gandhi who was going to become a barrister. Much later, when Gandhi started practicing in South Africa, and you all would know better than me, he became a master of reconciliation. All his record, all his history says, even his clients, he had only one condition: to speak the truth. In fact, one of the incidents was when he went to the jail to talk to one of his clients, and he asked, "Why did you do it? You tell me the truth." So that person said, "I did it to live." So he said, "Why is it so important to live that you commit a crime?" So that intensity of truth he was operating at. But Gandhi at the same time was also becoming very religious and spiritual, not in the restricted orthodox sense of ritualistic spirituality, but he was having his own consciousness which was expanding from his self to everybody around him, which gradually expanded to the whole of India and to whole of humanity. At that time, he used to say about truth, God is truth. This is often misinterpreted when people say he was such a communal person and he was always, he brought religion, but he did not bring in that typical orthodox religion into politics. This was a much higher religion. The dharma which Gita mentions, or dharma which is mentioned in the ancient scriptures, it was that dharma. It was not a dharma of Hindu, Muslim, and this communal type of stuff. But this same person, after few years, changes this sentence. This is the biggest indicator that Mahatma Gandhi, after a certain age, was never doing anything which was unconscious. Every word he spoke, every action he did, everything, whether in personal or public sphere, Gandhi had given a thought to it. So he changed from God to truth is God. I think it was a space of a decade or so. People often used to blame Gandhi that you have said something 10 years back, now you're saying something else. To which he had simple answer that I am also evolving like everybody else. So this is what I was thinking 10 years back. This is what I'm thinking now. So whatever I have said last in the series of things, believe that. But this God, this truth is God. There was a huge thought behind it. And that thought is connected to empathy. He realized around a certain point of time after working in India that if you keep saying God is truth, then there always will be divisions and fights. then all religion will say that my God, your God, this God, that God, which was unacceptable to him. So Gandhi was not a man who would divide, he was a man who would unite. So he gave a thought to it, a very deep thought, peeped into his empathetic self, and how do you unite people? He said, okay, gods may be different, but everybody in this world is trying to find out their own truth. So he switched to truth is God, to which he stuck till the end of his life. Everybody has a right to find out their own truth. Everybody has a right to find their own God. So instead of saying you believe in one God and that is your truth, which is a thing which is superimposed from above, drop that. Use your own brain, use your own mind, use your own empathy, your own resources, your own sacrifice. Find out what is your truth. And that truth becomes your God. Like non-violence became Gandhi's God. And the way he trained his mind was his truth. His truth was that in deeper instincts, we are all very violent animals. Gandhiji was also a man of huge rage. But over years, he trained in 24 into 7. He kept training his mind. He kept training his mind to a point where his unconscious mind also probably became non-violent. So the Gandhi we know is the Gandhi of 50 years of his age, the typical image. Before that, it was all experimentation with Kasturba, with people, with Billy Polak in South Africa. Everybody, I mean, he knew his rage. That's how he trained. That was his truth. But there is something else which is very important. And I would just end with this. All live in some absolute truths. What is the truth after all? The earth is rotating, it is revolving around sun. There are galaxies. There's a human mind which has a lot of neurons. It has a lot of conditioning from society. You have your set of emotions, you have your set of thoughts, and you have all of us have our story within our heads. So, can the truth be absolute? We tend to believe that truth is absolute, but it is not. Gandhiji also realized this, and that is probably what made him switch from this to this. God may be absolute, but truth is relative. So Gandhiji was, over time, he changed from absolute truth to relative truth. And what was this relative truth? He had realized, and this was again empathy. Gandhiji had realized that people have their follies, people have their weaknesses, and if one person can do a mistake, I can also do it. So why blame that person? So he said, relative truth is that I am not going to reject a person for his so called relative truth. I will accept the person. I'm not going to throw the person out. I will never reject a person, which he never did in his life. Even his worst of enemies, he never rejected. And accept their relative truth. So your relative truth and my relative truth may match. Sometimes they may not. But if your relative truth, I think, is lower than my, inferior to my relative truth, obviously that is not acceptable. So you have your own, I have my own. Let's meet. Let's live like human beings, validate each other, and have empathy, and then unite. So that is what. So this relative truth business and truth is God business is what he was spreading all around. His truth was non-violence. He stuck to that, and rest of it, like satyagraha and non-violence and dispossession, all that were just satellites of this big, big, big orbit of Mahatma Gandhi. So I think that is my brief idea about Gandhiji's idea of truth. It is very, very workable. The only thing we have to decide and keep working on it. The baseline of it is empathy. The baseline of it is the other person is as truthful as I am. After all, brain is making story. Truths do not become the reason for rejecting people and sowing hatred. Absolute truths are only physical laws, and all have to live on that. So I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alok Bajpai, for your very knowledgeable remarks, educating us on today's topic, truth. Our next speaker is Mr. B. Sanjay. Mr. B. Sanjay is a known communication professional and development activist. After completing his MA in mass communication, he joined the Indian Adult Education Association, IAEA, as an editor. He writes regularly in Indian Journal of Adult Education and Proud Shiksha, both published by the IAEA. He has co-authored a much thought of book entitled Skilling India: Initiatives and Outcomes. Recently, he has been nominated as a member of governing body at the Sri Aurobindo College by the University of Delhi. At present, he is serving IAEA as a research officer. We welcome Mr. B. Sanjay to talk about.
Thanks. Before I give my remarks on the topic of the day, I would like to say thanks to the organizers that they have given me this chance, this opportunity to express my view on specifically on truth as enshrined in Gandhian philosophy or perspective. I would also like to thank the organizer for bringing these core issues. That is, you say the five facets of Indian culture, and truth, compassion, creativity, then dialogue, and finally service. I see a very interesting line here, and that is, if really we have a huge audience or erudite audience, we know that if we talk about Indian culture and Indian civilization, the basic percepts, what we used to say, is universal tolerance, brotherhood, spirituality, the power to sense coordination, that is synergy, and these are the core areas which we reflect when we talk about Indian culture. And today, the organizers have selected a different set of facets, which is, I consider, is the demand of the day. Because in this world where we are facing a pandemic, and the pandemic which has changed our way of thinking, entirely our way of thinking, it has not pushed us to a corner where our health hygiene is being compromised. We are facing a severe crisis in terms of economics, and God knows what else will happen in the days to come, and whether we will be able to sustain this economical thrust. Because if really we go few years back, then it was 2015 when the entire world was was in a developmental discourse governed by United Nations, and that comes Millennium Development Goal. And today we are in the era of Sustainable Development Goal, that is SDG 2030, and we are looking for we are just trying to think that through implementation and execution of Sustainable Development Goals 2030, we will be able to ensure quality life to the last man in the series, which was the motto of Gandhi. If we try to enter, as Dr. Alok Bajpayee said, that he was very much concerned with the empathetically concerned with the last man, and under SDG 2030 we are trying to get that target, but suddenly it has been tarnished. So what is required? We in India, here we know that Government of India just now have launched a new education policy where it reiterates that volunteerism can only help us. Now volunteerism and service, so these two things comes through what set of facets the organizers have selected. I really thank you for selecting these five facets. I, I in fact see that you are trying to mainstreaming these five topics, which will really it's a affirmative action taken to change the discourse of the day. So thanks. And now about truth. So it's really a tough thing when we see truth from Gandhian perspective. See, when I try to understand Gandhi, I read Gandhi as continuation of the quest of truth enshrined in Indian culture. If we consider Lord Rama as incarnation of Indian culture, where each and every, the Purushottam, the man which reflects all the desired virtues, then we can connect the dot till Gandhi. Gandhi in our era, it seems that he is apostle of the same quest of truth. And what he is doing, he is sincerely doing the same thing as Lord Rama tried to do in his era. Why I am saying so? Why I am saying so? That I find that truth is not a political commitment for Gandhi. Throughout, as Dr. Bajpayee says, that it is in his life, in his life, in his journey, it's evolving till end. Since beginning, when he is a child, when he says he accepts that I learned abusive language in my classroom, and at the end, when he says that God may have many manifestations, but for me, truth is God. So this huge journey, I consider this huge journey shows the evolution, and this journey for the quest of truth is similar to what Lord Rama tried to play in his era. If Ramayana, if the epic Ramayana tells about the journey of Lord Rama, then my experiment with the truth reflects Gandhi's journey or the quest of truth. So this is how I see, and I find very nuanced approach in Gandhi's vision. At one point of time, he says, coming to the worldly life, he tries when he is saying that truth is not something which I illusize. Truth is innate, my innate love. I am a worshipper of truth. He claims himself to be the worshipper of truth. And when he says that I am a worshipper of truth, what he is trying to do, to me, he is trying to serve that purpose, that eternal journey, to fulfill the cherished goal of humanity that Indian culture stands for. And that comes that when we say sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pasyanti, ma kaschit dukh bhag bhavet. Let everybody, each and every individual be happy. There should be no illness. Let everybody enjoy the best, and let the peace prevail. So this is something which the civilizational discourse, in India leads towards. And Gandhi in our era stands for that. I remember that how beautifully Gandhi accepts all his difficulties, hurdles, and even if mistakenly he tells anything which is wrong, which proves to be wrong in the later years, later or after years. I would like to quote Francis Fukuyama. At one point of time in his book, End of History and the Last Man, he says that liberal democracy appears to be end of man's ideological evolution. And what Gandhi says, Gandhi appears to be so rational, so accommodative, that he accepts that whatever I am saying today, although I forcefully say that it is my truth, but it may not be truth later on. It may change. The reality may change. So he accepts, which reflects the accommodative view that Gandhi used to have. So I see that Gandhian truth is something, a virtue that even a simple man, a man in the last row can follow it automatically and can find himself at ease. It's not that verbosity, that big claim, I am a follower, I am a worshipper of truth. It's a life of a simple man, and here he symbolizes, and here he exhibit a life, incarnation for all the entire humanity, that yes, it can be followed. It can be followed. He in one of I remember one episode which happened when he was in England. He says that I was invited in a meeting of business persons, and when I asked that, when I told that I would like to tell about business ethics and the value of truth, so people, he says that people told me it is a gathering of business personalities. A huge number of businessmen are there, and for businessmen, truth stands nowhere. If they speak, really they speak, they come out with the truth, they will not be able to pursue their business. So Gandhi reiterates that if this is the meaning, if this is the consideration of truth, then it is contrary to what I want to pursue. And he brings the entire discourse of ethics here. And this journey, I think this is where Gandhi becomes a common man, a man with all of us and all entire humanity, where it seems possible for anybody, if we read, if we get enlightened with the Gandhian perspective, which is much of use today when we are at loggerheads with each other, or we are heading towards some sort of civilizational clash, which is being propounded and being right now followed by political masters and political dispensation. We think it's a way out. It's a way out where which can lead and where truth can be fulfilled. So this is where I find Gandhi in current perspective, and I think that Gandhian perspective, the space truth as virtue occupies in Gandhian perspective, and its relevance in our life, where we say that astoma sadgamaya, tamsoma jyotirgamaya, mrittoma amritgamaya. It's really truth for Gandhi is a way to find out that supreme reality, where he desires that, oh God, let us lead from falsehood to truth, from darkness to light, from death to immortality, and let peace prevails with everyone. And this is what I as a development professional and working with masses, I think that it's very easy to communicate with the masses when Gandhian perspective is in our hand. If we are equipped with that philosophy, yes, yes, even in these tough days, we can answer the question of the masses, and it's definitely a way out for whole humanity. This is, I think, with this, I'll end my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. B. Sanjay, for sharing your remarks on today's topic, truth, on the Gandhian perspectives and the 5 facets of Indian culture.
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहे जे फिर परारी जाने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहे जे फिर परारी जाने रे पर तुमके उपकार करे तो ये मन अभिमान नाने वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहे जे
I would like to now welcome Mr. Sham Kishore Sahai. And Mr. Sham Kishore Sahai is currently the editor of the Lok Sabha Television India. He served on media channels such as Sahara TV, HT Media, and Jagran. Welcome, Mr. Sham Kishore Sahai, for your remarks.
PG, for inviting me in this such a nice talk series. And I must extend my thanks and good wishes and congratulations to the whole team for organizing such a precious and nice talk series. Gandhian perspective and 5 facets of Indian culture. Today is about the one of the facets, the truth of Indian culture. Mundaka Upanishad says that Satyamev Jayate Nandatam Satyena Pantha Vitto Devaya. Truth will have the final victory. No one should have any doubt about this. And the path of the Devatas, the divine path, is filled with truth only. Gandhi ji happened to be a personality who is one of the most debated, most admired, a person who mesmerized the whole world, a person who amused the whole world, a person who left the impression that even today we are compelled to discuss about his philosophy, life, and everything, what he has done in his life. If I need to briefly analyze his life, I can say that there are 5 elements which really we should explore. And those 5 elements are that he was a great orator. He was having a deep connect with the people. He was having very clear thoughts, clarity and thoughts. He was very simple in his life. Simplicity was core to his philosophy. And 5th is transparency. He was so transparent that sometimes people would be embarrassed to know that he did such things. He did that so many things. The autobiography he has written, My Experiment with Truth. The title of the autobiography is very true, in letter and spirit. Whatever he has done and whatever he wanted to let people know, he spoke about everything. He wrote everything. Truth is something which we all talk about, but it is really very difficult to follow in our life, in behavior. Simply we feel that in this world, you cannot be so true. You cannot speak everything. You cannot let people know everything. You will be cheated. You will be not treated fairly. And there are so many things. And that too he experimented, being the politics, being the freedom movement. He experimented all those things. And that makes him so complex. That makes him so interesting in a way that we cannot even think of applying those all philosophies, those all ideals in politics. Keep aside the general life. But he experimented, and not only experimented, he made it sure that the path of the success is achieved. And he left a great impression in the whole freedom movement that ultimately India got independence. And non-violence, truth, compassion, peace, these are said to be the 4 feet of Dharma. Dharma is very central to Indian culture and philosophy. Ved says, Yato abhyudhya nisreya siddhi sa dharma. Dharma is an element which can lead you to success in this worldly life and nisreya siddhi. In other world also, you will excel, and whatever has to be achieved in real terms, you will achieve those things also. That attainment will be yours if you follow the Dharma. And what are the 4 feet of Dharma? First is truth, and second is compassion, third is peace, and fourth is ahimsa. Gandhiji was a true manifestation of this 4 feet of dharma. And there are 10 other features of dharma also. Dhriti, Kshama, Daya, Tap, Shauch, Indriya, Nigrah, Dhi, Vidya, Satyam, Akrodho, Dashakam, Dharma, Lakshanam. These are the 10 features, 10 traits of dharma. If one is having all those traits, all those virtues, then he is a dharmic person. Dharmic person cannot be translated in any other language, since it has got its own narration. You cannot translate this. It is a value which cannot be translated in other languages. You can understand. So Gandhi was true manifestation. He experimented all those things, and what contribution he really made to the Indian freedom movement, if we try to understand, was that he made the Indian freedom movement a mass movement. That freedom movement started way back in 1857 with the first ever revolution, and that it was kept going, and Britishers kept getting stronger and stronger day by day. But when he entered into Indian politics of that time freedom movement, he was credited with making it a mass movement. Why? Because he was having a deep connect. There was so transparency. He was so simple. And the Indian people got connected. They could see their impression in Gandhiji. Whatever was there in his mind, he spoke very plainly. Whatever there was in his heart, it was there in his mind, it was there in his words. What we call mansha vacha karmana. If what you think, what you do, and what you speak, if there is an association, there is a connect, there is a uniformity in these all three, it has to have its impact. There will be a divine spark if this circuit is connected. What we say in electricity, if this circuit is connected, there has to have a spark, and that spark was there in Gandhiji. And today we really need to analyze that he was a true embodiment of Indian philosophy and culture. And Indian philosophy and culture happens to be something which has always shown path to humanity. The core values are such that we have to go back to them whenever there is distress, whenever there is problem, whenever there is violence, whenever there is anything which is disturbing the whole humanity. Gandhiji, from his life, showed the way that this can be practiced, this can be followed. Yes, you will have to face the resistance, you will have to face the difficulties, but you can always follow. That's why Einstein, he was the contemporary, he was compelled to say that generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth. Really, if we try to analyze Mahatma Gandhi from our perspective, from our frame of mind, we are really amused. We sometimes feel that he was not a real person in his life, how he behaved with his own people. But if we really can enter into the frame of mind of Mahatma Gandhi, then we can understand that we are really indebted to him. We are really fortunate that the land from which we belong, on this land, ever such a personality, such a great person walked upon. With that, I would like to end my statement. Thanks for inviting to this talk show. Thanks, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sham Kishore Sahai, for your knowledgeable remarks this evening. Our next guest speaker joining us from USA is Professor Mark Jorgensmeer. He is an American scholar in sociology, global studies, and religious studies, and a writer best known for his studies of religious violence and global religion. He is a distinguished professor of sociology and global studies at the University of California, Santa Barbara. We welcome Professor Mark Jorgensmeer for his remarks on today's topic, truth.
I'm Mark Jorgensmeer. I'm a professor of sociology and global studies at the University of California at Santa Barbara. And I've been interested in Gandhi and Gandhian ideas for all of my academic career. But let me tell you how it all began. It's a kind of interesting story. Years ago, when I was a graduate student, which really was years ago, I went to India to study. First time I was out of the United States, I went to India to study at Punjab University, and then they asked me to teach a course on political development, which I did in the Department of Economics. It's a very interesting experience. Actually, there was another graduate student in economics at the time, a young man by the name of Manmohan Singh. You may have heard of him. I think he's gone on to do rather remarkable things since then. Actually, I made this connection when I happened to sit next to Manmohan Singh at an event just a couple of years ago. And sorry to say, I didn't really know him at the time I was at Punjab University. But I was just at Punjab University for a year or so before I realized that there was a famine in East India and Bihar. And I wanted to do something to help out. So I left Punjab. I went to Bihar. And I wanted to join some movement that was doing really significant work. And I noticed these people organizing food for work projects in the villages. And I was very impressed with the way they were trying to use the giving out food during the famine as a way of getting people to organize and to work together for their common good. And these are smart people. I said, who are they? Turns out they were Gandhians. So I joined the group, and the movement at Bihar at the time was led by a remarkable man, Jayaprakash Narayan. It's another name that you might be familiar with. And so I lived and worked with J.P. Narayan for a good part of a year, where I got to know him and I got to know the Gandhian movement from the inside, which is the way I began my interest in Gandhi, not so much intellectually at first, but through practical consequences of Gandhian ideas. And when you think of Gandhian ideas, there are really three important, significant ones. One, of course, is ahimsa, which we all know, the idea of nonviolence. The other is the one that's closely associated with J.P. Narayan, and that's sarvodaya, which means welfare for all, or uplift for all, or progress for all. And J.P. and Vinoba Bhave did remarkable things in trying to organize in the villages and to have a land distribution project to provide for uplift of desperately poor villagers in a way that they could have a new start on life and they could work together in a collective and common endeavors. And then the third idea is satyagraha. It's a term that Gandhi invented, really. When he was searching for a term in South Africa to describe what a lot of people describe it as passive resistance, his method of conflict resolution. And he said, there's nothing passive about it. It's very active. And it's more than the resistance. So he liked the term satyagraha. It comes from agraha, which is cognate with English to grasp, to hold on, hold firm to something. And satya, which is, means truth. And it's based on the is verb, sat, truth in the sense of what really is, what is essential about life, about things, about people, about ideas, about society. So Gandhi was convinced that there was an underlying truth in all of life, and certainly in all of social life and all of relationships. But the issue then was how to find it. And that really became a lifelong quest for Gandhi and a basis for the whole method of satyagraha. It was so important to him that his own autobiography was described. It was titled "The Experiments with Truth." Truth is something you have to go out and try to find and to experiment with. He described his religion, his belief in God, as a belief in truth, and he took the Christian phrase "God is love" and turned it in a different way and said God is truth, and then he reversed it and said truth is God. So it was that important to him that the idea of truth, that if we could fasten on that in some way. And I think that's what Satyagraha was all about. Well, what does this have to do with us? and what does this have to do with us in an age of pandemic where it seems like truth is a very scarce commodity indeed? I mean, we live in an era of fake news where people, including politicians, challenge the very notion that there is, a common truth that we all share, and they try to make us disbelieve the very facts that we see in front of our eyes, and to try to deceive us in a variety of different ways. And that's not just politicians; it's merchandising, it's contending ideologies, whether they be religious or political or social. We live in an era in which it's hard to know what's true. And what I'm saying is that's where Gandhi was. Gandhi was in exactly that same situation. To try to know what's true was really the biggest challenge of life. And that, I think, is what the idea of satyagraha is all about. I was so fascinated in this, I wrote a book about it. It's called Gandhi's Way, a manual of conflict resolution. It's my attempt to try to think through what Gandhi meant by satyagraha, and how he tried to apply it in a practical way in situations of conflict. Because it seems to me that it's not just the protest movements and the so-called passive resistance, the nonviolent struggle that we so much identify with Gandhi. But at a deeper level, it's a theory of conflict itself. It's a way of trying to think through what conflict is as a way to control it, to manage it, to live through it, and to make life better because of it. I know that sounds striking. It sounds strange. I mean, Gandhi said he discovered this really through the Bhagavad Gita. This wonderful part of the Mahabharata where Arjuna is about to go into battle, and he kind of screeches the brakes on the chariot, and he says out loud, "What am I doing? Why am I going to battle? It's crazy stuff. I'm either going to kill or be killed, and either way it's bad business." And just by luck, the chariot driver happened to be Lord Krishna. So Lord Krishna said, "You want to know why you have to fight? I'll tell you why you have to fight." And there begins the Bhagavad Gita, the song of the auspicious one, the most venerated piece of scripture, I think, in all of the Hindu tradition, where, among many other things, eventually, Lord Krishna says you fight because this is life. There's no way to avoid it. You're always in it. So the issue is not whether to win, but how to fight, and how to do so with dignity, to do so in a way that in which you come out of the struggle ennobled, rather than humiliated and destroyed. And that is so difficult, because I think for many of us, these conflicts are so debilitating, whether it's a fight that we have with our spouse or roommate or friend, or whether it's a political struggle. It just seems like it drains us of energy and makes us worse. So how could it be that Gandhi would insist, taking the idea from the Bhagavad Gita, the struggle could be ennobling, that you could actually come out of a struggle as a better person than you went in? And I think that's where the idea of such of truth that Gandhi talks about is so important. Because Gandhi said you don't know who's right at the outset. I mean, it'd be nice if we had, I know we have the Ten Commandments and we have all kinds of kind of rules, basic rules about life, but it's hard to apply them to everything, and it's hard for them to cover everything. There's so much of life where we just don't know what is true. And Gandhi said, that's right. that's exactly right. And yet, he believed that there was a truth. There was an underlying consensus. There was a basis of agreement upon which reasonable and good-minded people could agree. And even if they weren't reasonable, even if they weren't good-minded, they could be kind of encouraged to see the light, particularly if you stop dealing with them. This is where passive resistance comes in. This is where, as Gandhi put it, refusing to participate in anything humiliating, to not be a part of an untruth, but insist upon a truth. But how do you know what the truth is in the first place? Well, that's where Gandhi being a lawyer, saw that there was, some value in a whole legal system where attorneys argue for both sides. And he said, essentially, that's the first step of satyagraha. You have to argue for both sides. Not just for your side, that's easy enough to do, but for the other side. And you have to, for a moment, interrogate yourself to explain what you've done that is inadequate or is not appropriate or is not truthful in Gandhi's point of view. Because as Gandhi put it, everyone has an angle of vision on the truth. Even the lousiest scoundrel, even if those people we think are just devoid of any shred of truth, have something. If it's their own existence, they have something. Which is to say, not every truth is equal, and not every point of view is equally true. I mean, to say that, really, then you're talking about kind of a lowest common denominator notion of truth. And Gandhi didn't believe that either. I mean, when it came to the whole issue of the role of British in India, he decided that the most truthful role for them was to get out, to quit India, to not be in India at all. So it was, and yet he could argue that was good for the British as well as for Indians. And I think in the long run, of course, that has been true. That it is, and he could say that at the same time appreciating all of the virtues, the good things that he thought that British civilization had brought to the world, including to India. But at least at the moment of India being poised, the moment of its independence, Britain's role was not there, not in India, back in the UK, back in the British Isles. So all truth is not equal, and yet all of us have some possessed, even if it's just the tiniest fragment of truth. And to find that and to understand that is tremendously ennobling, especially if it allows us to reveal what was wrong with our position in the first place. Because we can't always be right all the time. And sometimes we don't know we're wrong until we're really challenged. And for Gandhi, that was one of the great virtues of a fight, and why he welcomed conflict. Not because he liked to fight with people, but he liked to learn from what a conflict provides you, and that is a sharp interrogation of you from someone else. And that kind of laser precision which these critiques give can help us understand ourselves better and to gain a stronger sense of our own truth. And that then is the basis upon which you can launch a struggle to try to change things. If you find a level of truthfulness in a conflict, which you think really does underlie both positions, and which you think really does serve your opponent as well as yourself. Something that passes the litmus test of ahimsa, nonviolence, which, as you know, means more than just not killing. It means literally ahimsa, not desiring to harm, or to put it positively rather than negatively, to love, to want to honor others, to want to uphold all of life. And if it passes that litmus test, that is, it's not simply a narrow, selfish, self-aggrandizing position, then you're moving in the right direction. Then you have an angle of vision of truth, a perspective on truth that can be shared, and that you can bring to your opponent and say, look, I disagree with you about a lot of things, but look at it this way. We can both be better off if we adopt a different stance towards this whole conflict. I'll stop fighting for some of the things I was fighting for. You stop fighting for some of the things you were fighting for. And let's both fight for the things that we both think are valuable and we both want to admire. We want to experiment with truth. We want to try to find the nugget of truth that's hidden in all the layers of self-aggrandizement and greed and hypocrisy and all the other things that we use to try to keep from facing the truth. And that, I think, is the basis of satyagraha, because you can have a campaign on nonviolence that earnestly tries to move towards a resolution of a conflict. It can be successful only if the opponent sees that it makes sense for them in the long run, that it does help the broader situation in some way. Let me give you some examples, because I know I'm kind of talking theoretically, but I've been impressed in the last couple decades of some very vicious conflicts that have been resolved in a way that I think Gandhi would have greatly admired. And one example is Northern Ireland, which is a case really very much like Israel and Palestine, where it's a case where you have two sets of people, both of whom, in the case of the Northern Ireland, the Scottish Unionists who came one time to what was the Ulster plantation, and they settled Northern Ireland. Then you have the people from Ireland who, were part of the Irish tradition for centuries. But the Scottish immigrants had lived there also for many generations, so they felt that this was also their land. So they both felt it was the same place, the Protestants and the Catholics, the Protestant Scottish, the Catholic Irish. And yet this rivalry was so intense, and the Irish who were in Northern Ireland felt that they were being treated like second-class citizens in an area that was dominated by these Protestant people of Scottish background. So they began protesting, and it became a very vicious protest. These were so-called troubles of Northern Ireland. And I'm talking terrorism, bombs blown up in London and the streets, savage attacks in Belfast. It got so bad. I mean, people were kidnapped. So-called black taxis would be roaming around and would pick up people if they were the wrong side. They were just hideously tortured and killed, and their bodies thrown out, left on the road. It got so bad they had to build a wall down in the middle of Belfast in order to separate two parts of the town. And it looked like that conflict would just go on forever and ever and ever and ever. But in part because people began weary of the conflict, because it did seem like it would go on forever and ever. That some backdoor negotiations began, not with the most strident leaders, but with the kind of number 2 or 3 level in command that began talking. They brought in Senator George Mitchell from Maine, an American of Lebanese background, who had no connection with either side, which was the point, because he could be a kind of an honest broker to help me kind of go back and forth between both sides. And then the country of Ireland and the country of UK got involved in the act because they had to, because they were the broader entities of which both the groups within Northern Ireland were a part. And eventually they came to what was called the Good Friday Agreement, a resolution that set up a structure of governance that is magnificent in that it's not a kind of an airy kind of optimistic plan that assumes everybody gets along fine. Just the opposite. It assumes everybody hates each other and they don't trust each other. So it's a structure set up with equal representatives on both sides, equal ability to veto resolutions from one side or the other. In other words, it's set up so that two communities who don't trust each other, who feel uncomfortable being together with each other, can live with each other. And they can then promote the common good without tearing each other apart. And it's been a bit rocky, particularly at first since then, but it still holds. The peace still holds in Northern Ireland. I mean, it is possible for truth to prevail, even in such a situation. The other example I was going to think of was South Africa, where, of course, for years, apartheid was kind of the law of the land, and we're the black majority within. This is South Africa, after all, is where Gandhi got his start, protecting the Indian population in Johannesburg and in Cape Town and Durban. My wife and I were in Johannesburg 2 years ago, and as a treat, she arranged for us to stay in the house that Gandhi lived in Johannesburg, knowing that I was a great fan of Gandhi, and this would be a thrill for me, which it was, to actually be there in the place that he and Herman Kallenbach, his friend, his theosophist and supporter, had built to be the basis of his operations in Johannesburg. But so South Africa was, a country just torn apart by ethnic tensions and conflicts, and the white minority just was determined to not give up power because they were afraid that if they did, they would be destroyed. They would just be. They saw what happened in Rhodesia. Their former Rhodesia. That they thought that the white settlers just would be treated like second-class citizens and kicked out of the country. In some ways, they deserved it because they were certainly treating the black majority that way, including the great leader Nelson Mandela, who, for years, who just suffered. I went out to the island where Mandela was imprisoned to see what the situation was like in those years he was there. It was just amazing. But it was amazing that he was able to endure that. But even more amazing when he was let out of prison and then he came back and that he was elected the first president in a new free South Africa. He could do so and take up his leadership without the kind of resentment, without the kind of attempt to get back at white people who had so miserably treated him. Just the opposite. He was determined that he was going to create a South Africa for everybody. There's a wonderful movie called Invictus, where Morgan Freeman, the American actor, plays the role beautifully of Nelson Mandela. And it's about how he used the means of the rugby team in South Africa. So the rugby was the favorite sport of the white people in South Africa, and soccer or football was the favorite sport of the black. So, but he thought he should honor the rugby team, and he managed to make it possible for the international rugby competition to be held in I think in Cape Town. And he promoted this, and the captain of the South Africa rugby team was there, and I think the team won that year. It was a great moment. And the white captain of the rugby team came from a very racist family who hated blacks, and they thought that Mandela was just going to lead the country into ruins. But a real relationship of respect developed between these two men, the rugby captain and President Mandela, which you see in the movie, and the crowning moment is on the great event of the rugby competition where the captain says to Morgan Freeman, thanks him, and Morgan Freeman said, "Well, I respect you and I honor you for everything you've done." And the captain said, "No, Mr. President, it's I who respect you and honor you for everything you've done." And I think that's symbolic of a Gandhian way of trying to cut through the natural tensions and the natural ability to see things only one's own way, and to try to find a world and a society which is decent for everybody. Not that it works forever. I mean, South Africa has new problems. When we were there, we learned about a lot of them, and new tensions, and there are new conflicts that people have to deal with. But that's where it seems to me that Satyagraha is such an important vehicle, not just for conflict and particular conflict resolutions, but a vehicle for life. Because in some ways that message from the Bhagavad Gita is still true for all of us. Conflict is life. It's the world in which we live. You can't escape it. There's no point in even trying. And so the issue is how to live with grace, with dignity, in a way that makes our involvement with conflict ennobling rather than humiliating. Because ultimately then, Satyagraha and Gandhi's message to all of us is not just a temporary message for protest and for particular conflicts, but a message for how to conduct ourselves in life. Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you on this Gandhi celebration today, and my congratulations to all of you for participating in this event. And think of Satyagraha and think of Gandhi as you think about your own lives. Good afternoon, and good night.
Thank you so much, Professor Mark Jarensmeer, for that very informative remarks. Now we've come to the conclusion of today's program, and I'd like to welcome Ms. Cheryl Banwarilal to render vote of thanks.
On behalf of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, I would like to express our deep gratitude and appreciation to our guest speakers, Dr. Alok Bajpai, Mr. P. Sanjay, Mr. Sham Kishore Sahai, and Professor Mark Jarensmeer. Thank you once again for taking time off your busy schedule to join us today. I would like to say a special thank you to Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Ms. Shisti Harinarayan, and Mr. Piyush Khandewal. Kindly continue watching our online program. Thank you.